Welcome, brother, to part 2 of the significance of a Davidian constitutional association. In last report, part 1, we went over the basics of why this is significant. The knockout blow had produced a 100% rod-only group, and the rod-only group was led by the Lord. We saw that nearly every major Davidian association today believes that God had led the 100% rod group to regroup in California, and he told the group to begin under the Constitutional Association platform. In other words, as you review in part 1, Brother Warden, who was basically the leader of the group, along with M.J. Bingham, made the announcement that the Davidians had lost track of their main focus, and that was to be a part of the Davidian Constitutional Association. So in part 2, we'll go into more about why it's so significant. Before we continue, we ask that you kneel and pray, claim the promise of John 16:13, and he shall guide us into all truth. Let's begin. All right, so now we're going to look at the history of God's leadership from the SDA Church to today. The SDA Church established organizational leadership in 1863 in the form of a general conference. They elected John Byington as president, Uriah Smith as secretary, and E.S. Walker as treasurer. The governing council structure has existed to this day. So we see that the SDA Church started the organizational platform by having a president, a secretary, and treasurer, and a council as the governing body. The Davidian Seventh-day Adventist movement had a governing council of president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Also, 3 other members on the council. This existed until Florence Houteff abandoned the work in 1962. And we'll show you the link for that in the description box. The only exception being Florence was vice president as the president could only be a prophet, as Brother Houteff was. Then we have the 100% rod-only association, followed Brother Houteff's executive structure, with the exception, as with Florence's council, electing only a vice president instead of a president. As with the SDA and Florence's governing body, this association elected officers. So we see that in the Lord's leading of his governing bodies, this has all been consistent, brethren, of a president, a vice president, a secretary, and treasurer, and then it changed to only a vice president, secretary, treasurer, and council upon the death of Brother Houteff, which was the 100% rod-only association. Salem Association had the same governing body with elected officers as at the SDA. Florence's council and 100% Association's council, the rod-only group. Since the death of Don Adair, we are not sure what the governing body consists of today. Mountaindale Association has the same governing body with elected officers as the SDA, Florence's council, and the 100% groups, rod-only groups association council, and possibly Salem's council. Note, the leadership of God's movement since the SDA establishment has been by a governing body of elected council officers. Again, we go back to the inspired references from Spirit Prophecy, and that's found in Testimony of Ministers, page 31. We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us. Now, brethren, we have seen clearly that this is how the Lord has led his governing body. So, if this is the case, then we know that the future, and even today, is going to be led by the same past. So this is very clear. This is why we wanted to do these presentations, to let people know that we must stick to what the Lord has done in the past. And this way we will not fear what he's doing today. We will understand it. We will know his movements in regards to his leadership and his one main governing body. So what's the key takeaway point? As we're told to know how God has led us in the past, it's to know how he leads us today. We note the following. The leadership of his past organizations never had a scattering of councils and groups as the main governing bodies. They had one main council and governing body to lead out in the work. So this is very important, brethren. And this leads to the idea that we're all kind of like doing our own thing today, and there's no real leadership that we need to follow. Let's just do the best we can with the message, try to make as many converts as we can. Brethren, this has never been God's leadership model. And we must remember this, because the confusion out there today really needs to be cleared up. So who is the one main Davidian Seventh-day Adventist governing body today? Well, let's start with the process of elimination. To the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Isaiah 8:20. Which groups teach what the prophets taught, the testimonies? This includes what our final message of Elijah teaches. Not what anybody but the prophets taught, which eliminates Florence Houteff, the New Codes, Don Adair, Assyrian Confederacy, M.J. Bingham, pastors, and Lennox Sam, real Elijah, etc. Okay, brethren? So right here, this is going to narrow in the candidates. We cannot be accepting these people that have been added to the golden bowl. It's not what the Lord intends us to know from the message. Mountaindale. They are not speaking according to Isaiah 8:20 word. The testimony includes additional people besides the prophets, namely Florence Houteff and Don Adair. Private interpreters were allowed to enter their pipes into the golden bowl. So, brethren, we take a look at Mountaindale, and unfortunately, this is why Pre-11 had to break away from them, or I should say, was forced out. Is that we held firm against this idea that Florence Houteff and her New Codes, Don Adair and his Assyrian Confederacy were not part of the Golden Bowl, and therefore we can't be teaching that. And that was the real problem there. So we go to Waco, which is basically the same thing. They add the New Codes, they add the Assyrian Confederacy to their doctrines. And this, is we find, is very offensive to the Lord, because it's not the truth. The same with Salem. All right, Salem has done this very thing. Bashan. Now, it's the same as Mountaindale and Waco, but instead of Don Adair's teaching, they subscribe to M.J. Bingham's teaching, which by way of disclosure was Adair's teacher. So M.J. Bingham had some ideas and false doctrines that Bashan today follows. And so they're not according to the law and to the testimony as well. Now we have Wave Sheaf. They are the only Davidian Seventh-day Adventist group that teaches that a living person on earth today is the final Elijah to come. Although Lennox Sam does not directly say it, he implies throughout his studies that the Malachi 4:5 fulfillment must be himself. Victor Houteff cannot be the one, as he died. So, brethren, we see all kinds of strange fire doctrines coming from these groups. So we know that the Lord is not the author of confusion. And therefore, he wants the Zechariah 4 teaching model to be adhered to. And can we say that these groups are adhering to them? No, we cannot. So this helps us in our process of elimination. All right, we have the group UPA 7. Unlike the aforesaid groups, this group does not allow anyone else besides the prophets, which include Ellen White and Victor Houteff, to enter into the Golden Bowl. That being said, we at Pre-11th are hopeful sometime in the near future we can join up in studies over this one idea of this idea of one main governing body for God's work. As of today, they do not subscribe to one main headquarters, but rather many scattered over the world. They do not subscribe to leadership roles such as a vice president or council members. This period today is known as the scattering time period of the movement. That's based on Zechariah 13:7. Now, just as a way of disclosure, Brother Edstrom and I have made peace, so we've discussed some things that were our differences, and our cordial relationship is much better today. And we are hopeful that we can sit down with our brother and discuss these things, because some of the brethren have brought up the point that it would be nice for UPA 7 and Pre-11th Hour to join forces and work together in a more united way. But that one issue needs to be settled, and we're hopeful, that this could happen in the future. All right, Pre-11th Hour ministry. We hold that the Golden Bull exists of all the prophets, including the two last ones, Ella White and Victor Houteff, since 1844. Now, you can find that information, 5 symbolic code number 15, page 3. No one else is allowed to have their ideas or teachings put in. As we go by God's leading in times past, Testimonies and Ministers, page 31, we know that Mountaindale, the current most eastward group, God's eastward course, according to Ezekiel 47 teachings, is in probation to come in line with the truth. Cease adding non-prophets to the Golden Bowl. That's particular, as we said, that's Florence Houteff and Donna Dare. But soon that will end, and of course Pre-11th Hour will do what God instructs us to do. Importantly, we do believe, as the 100% rod-only group proclaimed, to have an ordained Davidian Constitutional Association as God's leadership governing body. So those are some of the main pillars, if you want to call them, that Pre-11th Hour stands by. We stand by only what's told in the Golden Bull by the prophets, and that ended with Brother Houteff. He was the last one to add to the Golden Bull. We don't believe any subsequent people were allowed to, and that includes Florence Houteff with her new codes, Donna Dare with his searing confederacy, and J. Bigham with his pastures, and all these different things that many of the main organizations today allow. So let's look at the period of transition. There is a historical example that existed in the past that helps us today to know the transition period today. The Lord proclaimed the message of truth while he still allowed the leadership of the Jewish church. This was evidenced by A, his approval of the little old lady putting her 2 mites into the Jewish church treasury. B, having the brethren still try to win the Jewish church members for 3.5 years after his death. So that's important, that there was a probationary time given even after his death. And that was the air-filled, don't forget, air-filled Jewish church. The stoning of Stephen was the end of the Jewish church probation. It now transferred to the apostolic church. So that is a perfect example, brethren, of the transition period. And so the key point, a probation time is always given to the air-filled church prior to the Lord making a transfer of his governing body leadership. Mountaindale is similarly under the same probation period, but the Lord accepted tithes and offerings during this probation period, as evidenced by Judas as the treasurer. In the same way, Pre-11th Hour likewise is accepting tithes and offerings. So this is the same example that we are doing today. Yes, we have not made a formal transfer, a formal Davidian Constitutional Association establishment of Pre-11th Hour. That is true. But we are in that probation period for Mountaindale. We are ongoing in our talks with them. we are hopeful that they will come to the light and correct what we discussed tonight. And therefore, this would be a beautiful thing. Mountaindale and Pre-11th Hour reuniting and going forward to close out the work for Mother in the church. So that is the real hope that we have, and it remains to be seen. Like it says here, even after the Lord's terrible, brutal death, he still gave the Jewish church 3.5 years to come in line with the truth. So there is a history, brethren, of, and you can see that on our other videos about Davidian storehouse history, that the probation has always been given by the Lord. And so we can't rush. Some of the brethren with Pre-11th Hour are rushing and saying, well, let's start this organization now. Let's do it immediately. We don't need to waste any more time. No, brethren, we have to let it play out. And it is playing out. And I dare say that it is coming to the final time of this period. We are getting really, really close to that. All right, so let's go now to what about the independents? Well, the message tells us some serious things. I was shown that it is Satan's special work to lead men to feel that it is God's order for them to strike out for themselves and choose their own course independent of their brethren. Testimonies and Ministers, page 29. The Lord desires his chosen servants to learn how to unite in harmonious effort. It may seem to some that the contrast between their gifts and the gifts of a fellow laborer is too great to allow them to unite in harmonious effort. But when they remember that there are varied minds to be reached, and that some will reject the truth as it is presented by one laborer, only to open their hearts to God's truth as it is presented in a different manner by another laborer, they will hopefully endeavor to labor together in unity. Their talents, however diverse, may all be under the control of the same Spirit. In every word and act, kindness and love will be revealed, and as each worker fills his appointed place faithfully, the prayer of Christ for the unity of his followers will be answered, and the world will know that these are his disciples. Gospel Workers, page 483. So, brethren, this is very important for the independents to remember, that no, you're not authorized to go to work for yourself and just do what you think is right and proclaim the message the way you want to do it. Make your own home the storehouse. Now, we know in Answer, I believe it's volume 4, that direct question was asked. Can I do according to my own best judgment the delegation of tithes and offerings as I see fit? And Brother Houteff was very clear, brethren, that no, that is not right. You are to return it to the storehouse. And the Lord, in Brother Houteff's answer there, was looking forward to down to even today. In other words, there is a main governing body that you are to return it to. In this case, we're in transition period, and we know that Mountaindale, according to the eastward course, is that main eastward course body. But they are under probation. They have to come in line, renounce some of their ideas about having others add their truth or their so-called truth to the golden bowl. We can't allow that. So just like Jesus was accepting tithes with his treasury, we today are doing the same. And soon, if the airfield church, the airfield organization does not come in line, well, then we'll have to do as God leads. So what's our summary? Well, a Davidian Constitutional Association is God's plan for the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist governing body today. This is clear from studying our past as we are counseled to do. Be blessed and be faithful. Give this study a serious consideration as to doing the right thing in tithes and offerings to God's intended storehouse headquarters. So, brethren, we hope this has been a blessing in this two-part series to give a little more clarity about how to know God's leading today. All right? It's very important because unfortunately there's so much winds of doctrine about the leadership of God's governing body today. And we hope that this really will awaken some of the brethren to the truth of the matter. Until next time, may the Lord continue to guide you into all truth. Amen.